Our next principle of persuasion is liking. We all think we know what liking is, but much like reciprocity, the optimal use of liking requires some subtle practices. You'll recall that the core motives model is ideal for helping you decide which principles to consider first in any persuasion situation. When you have a relationship you need to initiate or build, reciprocity, unity, and liking are the first principles you should look to for opportunities to employ naturally. Let's take a look at evidence from the accounting and consulting firm KPMG on how important for business a positive relationship can be. First, KPMG developed an algorithm to measure if the relationship between an account manager and a client was weak, moderately strong, or already strong. In other words, the extent to which the two people liked one another, felt a sense of rapport with one another. Next, they looked to see whether the strength of the relationship influenced whether their account managers would get a yes from their clients after making a pitch for business. They found that when there was a non-existent or weak relationship with the client, the account manager would win the business only 30% of the time. However, account managers who had a relationship of moderate strength with their client got a yes 45% of the time. But the real traction came when the relationship was already strong. Under those conditions, the account manager got the win 65 to 70% of the time. So clearly, people prefer to do business inside good relationships. But in today's fast-paced, hyper-accelerated world, people will sometimes say that they don't have the time to build and nurture a relationship, that they're just too busy for it. Well, how long does it really take to strengthen a relationship? By using the 3 activators of liking that we will consider next, you can do it in less than 10 minutes. Liking has 3 activators: similarity, the degree to which others have things in common with us; praise, that is, compliments; and cooperation, working with someone toward a common goal. Let's look at each in turn, starting with similarity. We like those who are like us, or who are similar to us. Research has shown how this applies even to a seemingly minor similarity, a similar-sounding name. The researchers mailed surveys to people after editing the name of the sender to be similar to or different from the name of the person receiving the survey. For example, in the similar names condition, if the recipient's name was Robert Greer, the sender's name was listed as Bob Greger, whereas in the dissimilar condition, the sender of the survey's name would be listed as Mark Moore. The same was true for all the female recipients in the study. So if the recipient's name was Cynthia Johnson, in the similar name condition, the sender of the survey was listed as Cindy Johansson. whereas in the dissimilar condition, it would be listed as Beth Green. You get the idea. Now, here's the evidence of how impactful this small similarity was in producing social influence. In all cases, the survey sender asked the recipient to complete and send back the survey within 1 week. When the researchers looked at the numbers of recipients who complied with the sender's request, they were shocked. If the names had been made to look similar, the recipients were twice as likely to comply with the sender's request. Why would something so trivial have such an impact on compliance? Because people like those who are like them, even in small ways. And people say yes to those they like. Now, if something as minor as a similarly sounding name can drive compliance with a request, think of how much more consequential larger commonalities can be, such as similar backgrounds or interests or attitudes. A key takeaway is that before we begin to do business with or make a request of someone we don't know well, we should take the time to learn about the individual's history, likes, dislikes, hobbies, and so on. And there are 2 main ways to do so. The first is simply to go online to learn what the individual tells us on social media. This isn't proprietary information. It's what folks want others to know about them. The other route is to arrange an opportunity for informal, sociable interaction, such as meeting for coffee, or asking about family in the minutes before a conference call, or getting together for lunch before an important business meeting. It doesn't have to be formal or elaborate. Even casual interactions can offer opportunities to register and remark on genuine similarities that build rapport before getting down to business. To recognize the role that similarity plays in the liking process, let's examine the results of a study of negotiators who had to bargain against one another by email on a difficult business contract. Now, email is probably the most bloodless communication channel we have ever devised. There's little in the way of human connection that it allows. No chance to meet or see the other person, no chance to get to know them. There are just words that appear on the screen. As a result, the study produced a regrettable number of deadlocked negotiations in which no mutually acceptable agreement emerged. In fact, 30% of the time, both sides walked away with nothing. But then, the researchers made a small change in the procedures of the study that changed everything. Another sample of negotiators was asked to send some personal information to their bargaining opponent before the negotiation began. Descriptions of their hobbies, interests, music preferences, family background, that sort of thing. The results were dramatic. The percentage of deadlocked, winless negotiations dropped from 30% to 6%. The most instructive thing for us in the study was that it wasn't the amount of information that the bargainers exchanged that made the difference. Instead, it was the number of similarities that appeared inside the information that did it. Oh, you're an only child? So am I. Or, you're addicted to Korean barbecue? Me too. Or, we both love scary movies. How about that? The key factor was the commonalities they shared. Commonalities they didn't know existed until they exchanged personal information with one another. So what's the point of all this for us? If you are negotiating with another party, before you start the process, spend the time to identify similarities, even small ones. They'll significantly raise the odds of achieving a mutually desirable outcome. Here's a last example, a truly remarkable one, of how uncovered similarities can lead to liking and highly favorable business outcomes. It comes from an account by my colleague, Dr. Gregory Neidert, of a consultation he did for a Fortune 100 company that was experiencing a costly problem. The problem was that the company's negotiation team was spending far too much time in their activities related to acquisitions, which produced large opportunity costs and was distracting from other important issues inside the organization. To understand the problem, Dr. Neidert asked if he could sit in on one of the existing acquisition negotiations. They said no, but he could watch videos of some prior negotiations that had not gone quickly or smoothly. Now, he wasn't allowed to see the negotiations themselves, but he was allowed to watch the interactions that occurred before the negotiations began. And that was enough for Dr. Neidert to recognize a likely source of the problem. The lead negotiators of the to-be-acquired companies always got to the meetings along with their teams 10 to 15 minutes early, whereas the lead negotiator of Dr. Neidert's client, the acquiring company, routinely arrived late with his team, saying something like, "Oh, sorry about that, we got caught up in other meetings. I know time is money, so let's sit down and get to business." The result was, first, that the lead negotiator for Dr. Neidert's client disrespected the other team by being late. And second, allowed no time before the negotiations began for the kind of sociable interactions that could establish similarities that lead to liking. So, Dr. Neidert scheduled a meeting with his client's lead negotiator and got him to agree to make 3 small changes to each of the next set of acquisitions he would handle. First, he had to commit to arriving at least 5 minutes early for the sessions, particularly the initial one. Next, he had to assign an assistant to research online the other lead negotiator's background, interests, and hobbies, listing them as bullet points on a single sheet of paper that could be carried into the room. Finally, he had to agree to pick one topic from the list and bring it up in conversation with the other lead negotiator for just 2 to 3 minutes. What happened was that instead of spending 2 to 3 minutes in this sociable exchange, which often revealed similarities between the two, the negotiators typically spent 10 to 15 minutes in their exchanges. As we've discussed, these similarities, even superficial ones, can be powerful. Once you identify a genuine commonality and raise it in a conversation, that conversation takes on a life of its own. In fact, Dr. Neidert reported that at the start of one meeting, when the two lead negotiators started talking about how they both liked to sail, they just couldn't stop talking about it. And eventually, their teams had to pull them apart to get down to business. More importantly, the new approach produced a 30% savings in time and a financial savings of $10 to $30 million. This is another instance of a small big. In this case, a few minutes of small talk that makes contact with true commonalities that led to big positive outcomes. Now, let's look at the second activator of liking, praise. How simple praise works to influence people is illustrated wonderfully by the actions of Guinness Book World Record holder Joe Girard. Joe was the #1 car salesman in the United States for 12 years straight because he sold an average of more than 5 cars or trucks every day that he worked. That's an incredible number. Joe exemplifies the fact that it is not only true that we like those who are like us, but we also like those who do like us, and say so. Each month, Girard sent each of his more than 13,000 former customers a holiday greeting card appropriate for that month, such as Happy Thanksgiving, or Happy Independence Day, or Happy New Year's Day. But inside the card, there was a printed message that never varied. It always said, I like you, and contained nothing else besides this form of praise except Joe's name. I like you. It came in the mail every year, 12 times a year like clockwork. I like you, on a printed card that went to 13,000 other people too. Could a statement of liking so impersonal, so obviously designed to sell cars work? Joe Girard thought so, and a man as successful as he was at what he did deserves our attention. Joe understood an important fact about human nature. As a rule, people believe, praise, and like those who give it to them. Now, because praise can be either sincere or insincere, we find ourselves with a smuggler versus sleuth choice to make. On the smuggler side, although manufacturing a false compliment may make the recipient like you more, it will make you lose an even more powerful tool of influence: the chance to like the person you are complimenting. Look at it this way. If, as a sleuth, you take the time and effort to find just one truly praiseworthy thing to say about the person you want to influence, you will be liked more for it. But, in addition, you'll gain the added benefit of liking that individual more. And once the people you're dealing with recognize that you like them, something special happens. Down go the defenses. Down go their cautions about whether they can trust what you say. Why? Because everybody knows that we don't take advantage of the people we like. The consequence is that when you interact with them in the future, you'll do so while liking them more, which is something they're going to be able to sense. And that's going to make them trust that you will do your best for them. And they'll be right, because as much as we might not want to admit it, we all, each of us, do our best for the people we like. So, praise is important to activate liking, but how and when you praise people and give out compliments can matter a lot. I explain how to do so in the following video. There are two especially effective ways to amplify the impact of your compliments. First, give a compliment behind a deserving person's back. Praising people behind their backs can be more effective than telling them directly. Suppose you're at work, and in a meeting, your boss says something you consider very smart. You can't just say so right then, "Excellent idea there, boss," as that would appear self-serving. So, what could you do instead? During a coffee break or at the end of the meeting, tell the boss's assistant of your view. "You know, I thought what Sandy said about our next step forward was brilliant." Several outcomes are likely. One is that because people want to be associated with good news, the assistant will no doubt tell your boss what you said. Next, because you didn't offer your assessment for the boss's ears, no one should assign you an unattractive ulterior motive. And then finally, your boss will be more likely to believe your praise and like you more for it. Now, the second particularly effective form of praise is to compliment people when they've done a good thing you'd like them to continue doing. That way, they'd be motivated to do more of the good thing in the future in order to live up to the admirable reputation you've given them. What's the implication? If there's someone who ordinarily performs commendably, perhaps a conscientious colleague who often comes prepared for meetings, or a helpful friend who frequently tries hard to give useful input on your ideas, compliment them, not just on the behavior, but instead on the trait they've exhibited. You'll probably see more of it. Research supports this conclusion. Children praised for their conscientiousness on a task perform more conscientiously on a related task days afterward. Similarly, adults complimented on their helpful tendencies became significantly more helpful in a separate setting much later. Now, of course, in all cases, the praise should be honest. Real sleuths search for and remark on the genuinely praiseworthy aspects of those around them. Cooperation is another effective activator of liking. Shared interests and mutual goals promote cooperation, which in turn promotes liking. Despite the research evidence that cooperation produces liking, additional research shows that people are typically poor at identifying the shared interests and goals that foster cooperation. Professor Lee Thompson, for example, analyzed 32 negotiation research studies involving more than 5,000 participants to discover if bargainers were good at uncovering shared interests within negotiations. The results were striking. Negotiators failed to identify shared interests and goals that were genuinely present in the situation about 50% of the time. This kind of error can seriously undermine bargaining success. For instance, a separate study followed professional labor and contract negotiators over 9 years and rated them as average or skilled at obtaining the desired outcome. Those rated as average spent only 10% of their time seeking out shared interests and goals with their counterparts, devoting the rest of their time to staking out and defending their own positions. Compared to the average negotiators, the more successful, skilled negotiators spent 4 times as much effort searching for complementary interests and goals before moving on to stating their own positions. It was that difference that spurred cooperation that made them top negotiators. The real secret to the principle of liking is to like the one you're with. For example, in nearly every sales seminar I've ever taken, we were told that the number one rule of sales is to first get your customer to like you. Now, this approach isn't wrong. It's just not the number one rule. It's the number 2 rule. The number 1 rule is to first come to like your customer. As we've already emphasized, this is the case because when they see that we genuinely like them, they'll feel safer with us. And provided that we do like them, they'll be right. So that means we have to do our homework to find the things we truly have in common with them, or can sincerely compliment them about, or can genuinely cooperate with them on. Those things, if real, will not only cause them to like us, they'll cause us to like them, which is what they're really looking for in a business partner. Not just someone they like, but more importantly, someone who likes them. Finally, I think there's a kind of irony associated with these activators of liking. The activators of similarity, praise, and cooperation are so obvious, so simple, that a lot of times we forget to use them. We fumble them away because our heads are elsewhere, developing some detail or focusing on some minor feature of whatever it is we are presenting to a customer. And in the process, we forget to pay attention to the potent fundamentals of influence, like establishing liking through the activators we've discussed. Remember the study in which people didn't see a gorilla that was right there in the situation because they were focused on some trivial thing? Well, each of the 3 activators of liking is a persuasion gorilla, and we'd be regrettable bunglers of the influence process if we fail to harness this gorilla-like force when it's right there waiting for us to channel it into benefit for all concerned. To sum up the liking principle, remember the 4 things sleuths ask themselves to be maximally effective when employing liking. First, have I done enough homework to find all of the meaningful activators and amplifiers of liking so I don't overlook something important? Second, what do I have in common with my audience that I should highlight? Third, have I shared deserved praise with my customers, clients, and colleagues? And fourth, have I identified areas for cooperation?